If you're one of the few individuals that is still holding out hope that the benefits of the GOP's tax plan passed in 2017 will one day trickle down to you and other workers, I've got bad news for you. It's still not happening, and you probably shouldn't expect it to happen anytime soon. In fact, workers aren't doing particularly well since they passed this tax plan, contrary to what they said would happen. It's almost like trickle-down economics doesn't work, has never worked, and will never work. And we've got yet another example as to why the GOP tax plan is not helping workers. As Julia Conley of Common Dreams reports, tax justice and labor advocates were among those who expressed outrage Monday at the news that General Motors, one of the corporate giants that benefited immensely from the Republican tax plan last year, would cut 15% of its workforce, shuttering production facilities in 3 states as well as Canada to trim costs. The automaker is closing 5 plants in Ohio, Michigan, Maryland, and Ontario, with plans to cut thousands of office jobs in January, slashing a total of 14,700 jobs. The move comes less than a year after the Republican Party pushed through its tax plan, which offered a $514 million tax break to the company. According to the advocacy group, not one penny, $100 million of those savings went to enriching GM's shareholders, contrary to the GOP's claims that the corporate benefits of tax cuts would trickle down to workers in the form of raises and bonuses. General Motors' decision to gut its workforce epitomizes the bad corporate behavior Republicans in Congress have incentivized for generations. Instead of using its massive tax savings to increase employee wages or invest in its workforce, GM is shuttering plants and cutting jobs to increase profits and further enrich shareholders, said Ryan Thomas, a spokesperson for Not One Penny. The American people will not forget that Republicans in Congress permitted these morally reprehensible and irresponsible actions. Meanwhile, GM has already spent much of the last year cutting its workforce, offering buyouts to 18,000 workers. So what's happening is exactly what liberals such as myself predicted would happen. It's not going to trickle down. Executives are going to pocket the money that they're receiving in the form of a tax break, and workers are going to get screwed over. Now, last year, if you'll recall, there was story after story about companies like Home Depot giving their employees a one-time $1,000 bonus as a direct result of the GOP tax plan. Now, ask yourself this: how many of these stories have you been hearing about this year? How many stories has AP or CNN or even Fox News reported on about how a large multi-billion-dollar company is giving another $1,000 tax bonus or any bonus to their employees because of Donald Trump and the Republican Party's tax plan? Zero. So what you saw last year, as I pointed out, was nothing more than corporate PR. PR on behalf of the Republican Party to make sure that a highly unpopular bill, which did get codified into law, doesn't continue to be incredibly unpopular among Americans. So they would give their employees a one-time $1,000 bonus in order to gin up public support for the plan, because if the American people saw how the Republican Party ostensibly did something that helped workers, when in actuality it made large multinational corporations a lot more wealthy, then hopefully by giving their workers $1,000 bonus in order to make you think this is helping workers, they would get more tax cuts from Republicans. Because shit rolls downhill. If Americans think that these tax cuts help them, large multinational corporations are going to continue to petition Republicans to give them more tax breaks because Americans like them, and Republicans want to do what Americans like in order to get power in government and maintain the approval of America. So it's just one big circle of trickle-down economics. But unfortunately for them, Americans don't like these tax cuts, and now all of a sudden we're not hearing anything about these $1,000 bonuses. What happened, CEOs? I thought you said that the GOP tax plan benefited workers and you were giving your employees $1,000 holiday bonuses because of the GOP tax plan. It's almost as if that was all bullshit and propaganda because you wanted people to think that tax cuts for you benefit them. Doesn't work that way. And most people realize that because I think most people have common sense. Giving tax breaks to, quote, the job creators, unquote, does not help normal Americans. What helps Americans is increasing purchasing power of them, making sure that average Americans have money in their pockets so that way they can stimulate the economy, so that way they can purchase the goods produced by these multinational corporations. But when you end up giving tax cuts to multi-billion-dollar companies and some trillion-dollar companies, what's going to happen? Well, their executives are going to pocket that money, and that money will sit in their bank account and collect dust. They're not going to reinvest that back into the economy. And as a result, the economy becomes stagnant. Now, currently, that's not necessarily the case, but what we are going to see is another economic collapse if we keep doing trickle-down economics. Because deregulation and tax cuts for the rich is largely what got us the 2008 recession, and we are seeing the same type of thing happen again in the lead up to 2008. We're seeing that now. So if we're going to see another economic crash, you know who to thank. The Republican Party and these large multinational corporations that lobbied for these tax cuts for themselves. It doesn't help workers. It never will help workers because guess what? Trickle-down economics is bullshit. It doesn't work. The wealth never trickles down. If you want to help workers, you put the money in their pocket. You don't have to give a tax cut to the CEO first to make sure that they give the money to workers. No, if you want to help workers, give them a tax cut. But we know that Republicans didn't want to do that because the tax cuts that they included, the few tax cuts they included for working class Americans are set to expire. But those corporate tax cuts, they're permanent. So we all know exactly why this is happening. It's playing out exactly as we predicted it would play out. Trickle-down economics does not work. And we're going to learn that again the hard way. Because Republicans are still hell-bent on giving large multinational corporations tax cuts, and workers aren't benefiting from that. The economy will suffer as a result of us living in an oligarchy. And guess what? We're probably still not going to learn our lesson, and 10 years down the road, we're going to do it again. Because this is what we do in America. We repeat the same thing over and over again, even if it doesn't work, because we don't necessarily care about the result. We care about delivering money to our corporate donors. That's what the Republican Party stands for. And in large part, that's exactly what we're seeing in action now. So this is definitely disappointing. And I really hope that the GM workers who are getting screwed over now didn't buy into this idea that trickle-down economics and the GOP tax plan would benefit them, because we're seeing that in spite of their company getting a huge gift from the Republican Party, it's not benefiting them. It's not helping them all too much now, which is unfortunate for them.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.